Good evening and welcome to MTSO's Science and Religion Digital Dialogue Series. My name is Yolanda Clay, and I am so excited about our topic today. I have two experts that are going to really help us wrestle with technology, churches, and older adults. First, I want to talk about, in many ways, how this topic really became pertinent during the pandemic, and also just how this is not a new thing, kind of wrestling with digital ecclesiology, but that this has been something that's been going on for some time. So I want to first introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Heidi Campbell. She is a professor of communications at Texas A&M, and she is also an amazing scholar who has produced many works, among which one of my favorites is Digital Religion. She's also just recently published or edited several books on digital ecclesiology. And she is the director of the Network for Religion, Media, and Culture. Did I say that right? Or can you unmute, Dr. Campbell?
New Media, Religion, and Digital Culture Studies.
Thank you. And we also have Miss Marilyn Stratford. She has her Master's of Arts degree in Communications from the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. She also has a Bachelor's in Sociology from Philander Smith College, which is an HBCU in Arkansas. Welcome both of you to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to jump right into it because a lot of people are not really aware of this conversation around digital ecclesiology. So Dr. Campbell, could you kind of explain to us what is digital ecclesiology? Why should we care? And also, how did this conversation shift during the pandemic?
So I'm going to put a PowerPoint on a pinch to illustrate some of what I'm talking about. I've been studying the relationship between religious communities and their use of technology for over 30 years. But like many of you, in March of 2021, I was surprised how my Facebook feed from 1 week, seeing maybe about a half dozen pastors that I knew doing online services, to overnight dozens, if not hundreds, of people going online. And it raised a lot of interesting issues about not just about how are we adapting to this time of challenge, how might technologies help us adapt, but what does it mean if your church becomes the common experience of a mediated or an online form rather than just a face-to-face form? So these were some of the folks that I followed over the course of the first 3 months of the pandemic, and watching them how they either tried to transfer their services online, like my friend in Sweden, going into the church and just filming himself and then putting the videos out on YouTube. Or my friend in Wisconsin, an Episcopal minister, and he actually brought people into his home and kind of created a home altar, trying to translate the service, realizing that, instead of just let's go into the church, maybe let's try to make a connection in the home with people. And then my friend Byrony, who's a Church of England minister, she is a person that as ministers to several small congregations in the UK. And so she had to learn kind of how to connect, especially a lot of older people, where didn't even have a smartphone, let alone internet access, and learning how to kind of maybe translate and transfer some of these things to transform what it means to be the church and community during this time. So the question of digital ecclesiology, it's it stands for Ecclesia, which is the church, but especially the kind of organizational or structural form of the church. And ology is the study of. And digital ecclesiology is studying the church in the digital age, but more than just studying the technology and the how-to. It's looking at how the structures of the church maybe need to adapt or adopt new perspectives. What extent, are our liturgies, our practices, are they fluid or are they static? And how might, especially the experience of doing worship online, trying to make a community online, how might that change how we see the world? Over the course of the pandemic, because of a lot of these questions, I began to get together friends of mine virtually through these online webinars that I had, as well as books. And so I put out 3 books really quickly in 2020, one for church leaders, one for religious studies scholars, and one for theologians, really looking at, how are we adapting and what kind of questions is it raising on a practical level, how we study religion, but especially what do we understand what a church is, especially when the church is a mediated, digitally connected space. Through the course of the pandemic, I also started another research project that's funded by the Lilly Endowment. And this is a study of 2,700 churches and kind of what they did in 2020 to go online, and then how they use that technology that they bought and what the long-term impact of this is. So all of these kind of projects kind of really led into the book that Alonda referred to as Ecclesiology for a Digital Church. So it started in the on the ebook Digital Ecclesiology, but I felt it was important to have a conversation that's not just focused on America, not just focused on the Protestant tradition or an evangelical tradition, that really to kind of think through the challenges and opportunities that digital media create and challenge our understanding of church. We need to have a group conversation. So I was able to get together scholars from Asia and Africa, from Europe, from both Protestant and Catholic traditions, to talk about their experience, what they were seeing in churches around the world. And the book really kind of covers 3 sections. One is just theorizing about the digital church. So, when we put the word church and attach it to something that, again, isn't a physical space, doesn't have an organizational firm structure, what kind of theological language do we put around that? And to what extent does our traditional language or categories work or not work? We also had people talking about what are we learning from this online shift, and as far as what experiments are working, what experiments are not, and to what extent the people of God in the digital age, is this going to be a practice that we kind of walk in for the long term, or is there enough stumbling blocks to make us reevaluate this as a long-term strategy? And the third part of the book was looking at kind of what are some of the new practice that both have come out of the pandemic, as well as many churches had started doing online church before this. And in many ways, they got to kind of do a test case of of how to build community, how to do missions, how to do religious education online. And so, for me, digital ecclesiology is basically kind of opening up the old to see what is robust enough to stay with us, and where might our language, our vision, and even our models of church need to change to this new context we find ourselves in. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, that was a wonderful start to our conversation. And now we're going to hear from Ms. Stratford about her research specifically on older adults and uses and motivations of technology. If we could bring up that PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay. It's taking its time. Okay, there we go.
It's okay.
All right, Ms. Stratford, please enlighten us.
Hello. I appreciate being here with all you wonderful people, and I can't wait to just give you some short snippets of what I've been working on. Of course, I'm a recent graduate, this past May in 2022, and I have been doing complete research, since 2021, let's say, and I found out there was not adequate information on academic journals regarding seniors And that bothered me since I am a member of this group now. And so I got to make it interesting. So I said to my teacher, I said, can I defend this in my thesis? And he said, well, sure. But they kind of didn't feel the energy I did, that there was much interest. So I did this interview study group. And I'm telling you, I started with 12 people. And I had a waiting list up to today. Once people heard about it, they're still trying to get, I said, my study is concluded. They're still trying to get involved. And that made me feel good as a church member, as a student, and just as a senior itself. And so I said, great. So some of the things, let's go to this page. I want to reflect. Daily senior users of media, for instance, that work in the business field. This is one of my greatest candidates who really still works full time. And he said he's not a senior that's docile and sitting in a rocking chair. And that's the title of my paper, of course, Exchanging Your Rocking Chairs for Laptops, the study of media in seniors, usage in seniors. So diminishing is the notion of seniors who remain docile and are sitting in a rocking chair, holding a remote control for their TV sets like a smart TV, the new trend. The question was dominant in my research, and that was what percentage of seniors consider themselves to be referred to by the old notion of the idle chair, rocking chair sitter, or is it the new active senior enjoying adventures in the world of mass media and its multiple platforms? So on this page here, I'll go, his name was Mr. Cogbill. And question 12 and question 15, my recent research, these were some of the responses from one of my most enthusiastic participants. Mr. Cogbill stated for question 12, what do you use these sites for? Connecting with friends and family, posting pictures, and are keeping up with the news? How comfortable are you using Zoom and Google Meet? Well, these are my responses. Mr. Cogbill stated that he mainly keeps up with the news on their sites. Ms. Schmidt replied that she feels that Zoom is more comfortable for her to use. Ms. Henderson uses Facebook to connect with friends and family and doesn't post pictures. Ms. Harris is very comfortable with Zoom. And I'm going to tell you just a brief, not a bio, but some highlights on these individuals. Mr. Cogbill, as I said, has been working in the electronic internet services for years, over 30 years. Ms. Schmidt, she's a parent of 6 children, 1 special needs. She's a church secretary part-time, and she's totally interested in digital strategies and working with virtual and assimilating it with physical church. Mrs. Henderson is a 25-year-old veteran of the Army. She uses Facebook also, and that's her reply. And Mrs. Harris, she's a semi-retired teacher, is working comfortable with Zoom. And I think she's one of my most avid participants. And what I enjoyed most of all, I got a great data response after my conclusions were analyzed. Questions 1, particularly question 1, 3, and 4, and 5. You can see the percentile to your right in that little triangle chart. Question 1, 12 out of 12 participants use the internet and digital device in their social media experience. Question 3, what types of media were they using to connect with friends and family? It was 8 out of 12, 67%. Question 4, were you self-taught and using technology, for instance, internet, social media, or did you have a particular individual or friend that taught you? 9 out of 12, 75% responded in that manner. And the last one was question 5, do you use the internet from your smartphone or your laptop and to other devices? And their responses, 10 out of 12, 83%. And the next page I'm just going this quickly. Some of these participants naturally do not want their information shared, and I respect that, and I'm obligated to do that. But I just want to see, let you see here, the various ethnicities, age group. My oldest participant was 82 years old, as you can see. The second one was 79. And I mean, everyone on this list, excuse me, is super active. And some are still working, and the rest have spread all of this knowledge, because I want to say 3/4 of them are church members, and they are various faiths. And, you know, again, in my interviews, I didn't make that personal, because I had a disclaimer when I was doing my interviews. We're not doing politics and religion. Strictly answer these questions is what I need. And if I'm honest, I expect you to be honest. And that's the way I operated. Okay. And so it went well. I have a website, SavvySeniorsNetwork.com. And as again, I recently graduated, so I'm trying to build new content. And I have someone assisting me in that manner, because a lot of that graphic issues I want to let someone else manage. And Facebook, I'm not thrilled with how they, for now, I had to do it while I was in student status, but I got hacked immediately for some reason. And here I'm a media expert, and they hacked me and did a fake account, so I was discouraged. So moving on, that was the end of my PowerPoint. I hope I made some highlights to let you see all seniors are not, you know, being cathartic and sitting around in front of Cracker Barrel and reading the newspaper and playing dominoes. Some are really enjoying their media experience, and they're tired of asking all their family to assist. They want to learn themselves. So I direct them that every metro city has a library. You have free novice level classes. Just sign up and get started. And my site will be to encourage, inspire, and be a clearinghouse of resources for all of these wonderful seniors. And that's all for now on that PowerPoint. You can close that one out.
All right, now we are ready to start our conversation.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you so much, Ms. Stratford, for
Yeah.
sharing your research with us.
Thank you.
And I know for a fact there's not much research on seniors, particularly seniors who are trying to participate in digital ecclesiology. There are a number of challenges, and we're going to talk about those challenges. And then we're also going to talk about some interventions that we might do, a few that I know I've seen churches do as well. And so to get our conversation started, I'm going to ask just kind of a general question. I know that I have older parents, and one of my parents kind of adopted early to technologies, and the other one did not. So, what kind of reactions have you seen as far as different motivations, I guess, that people have for trying to participate in digital church, and what are their hesitations? And Ms. Stratford, you can kind of generalize this more on your experiences as far as what are some of the hesitations and also motivations for seniors to technology in general.
Okay, thank you. I'll make it short at this time. The motivators for seniors in my study and research project in learning digital technology for their church or business or personal life, they just want to communicate better with their friends, their jobs, for those that are working and family on their digital media devices and media platforms, particularly social media, and use their apps for those who are the top-notch savvy seniors to view the news, entertainment, research, shopping, banking. All of these categories, technology is constantly changing. So with my website, I wanted to motivate them, especially because there's so many that are merely beginners, novices, and so many friends, families, and so forth are telling them, they have a lot of misinformation on the internet and such negative context. And instead of, pushing them and praising them for just trying to start. And on my website, I will share safety protocols that will empower them to re-examine their beliefs. And when they're using their streaming devices, I want to discuss those. There's experts in all churches, and I felt that if the ones that are needing a boost, this is super great to have little mini classes. You're trying to boost your membership, market a particular fundraiser. There's such excellent information and resources that I want to put on my website. And like, for instance, Roku apps and Amazon Fire, all that development for some that want to develop a podcast or even just buy a computer. So many from my study don't have the basics. And I just want to share and push them on and let them know there's free resources for those that are not, affording those items. And so
Dr.
to me,
Campbell,
yes.
I want to ask Dr. Campbell, what have you seen as far as older people in your studies that you did during the pandemic? Because we know a lot of older people were isolated and they just had difficulty when everything just changed like that. So what have you seen?
Well, there was a number of layers of things. It wasn't just the congregational members, the older members that found is a challenge, but a lot of, pastors, the average age is, somewhere in between the late 50s, early 60s of the average pastor in the US. So, here you have a pastor who maybe had been resistant to technology or extremely hesitant. They may even have been kind of preaching sermons about, oh, you have to worry about the internet and media, and then they're kind of face to face with, okay, either we adopt this technology that we either don't understand or don't feel comfortable with, or we get left out. So the resistance was kind of, both happening and hesitancy for both leaders and congregational members. For a lot of the congregational members that we found in the study is that some of the, as Ms. Marilyn said, is that some of the older people in the congregation were actually the most enthusiastic. Because the church was so much a part of their lives that if they kind of said, the only way we can have church right now is to go online, we're for it. But it's a kind of what we call a barrier to entry. They didn't have the skills and the access to resources. And so what we saw is that there was a number of different strategies that different churches would take. One was to kind of try to provide maybe some training for senior citizens or people in their congregation. So we saw a lot of pairing up of kind of younger people or maybe staff people that would go around to people's house and kind of make sure here is access to your computer. Let's make sure that you got the internet set up. Now this is how you're going to log on to the church service. So there was a lot of interesting kind of partnering and especially some interesting examples of kind of mentoring really young people like the youth group with the senior citizens to help them. Another really important strategy was not just the provision of kind of help and kind of getting them over that fear, but was also a provision of resources. So some people, some churches would, if they had the resources, they would buy especially iPads, and then they would give them to certain members, or they would kind of have people that would courier them around, the community, so that people, maybe they couldn't watch the service live, but they could at least during the week get on, or maybe for the weekly Bible study. So kind of looking at how can we kind of leverage resources, and especially, where can we maybe some members of the congregation have an extra computer or tablet that they could loan out. So how can we see those? And the third strategy was, a lot of, the decisions about what a service looks like. Part of it comes from our tradition, but a lot of it comes from the leaders themselves, the kind of style, the kind of preaching, the kind of, community feeling they're trying to culture. And so, they had to kind of learn how to adapt that in a digital space, but also kind of think about, okay, what maybe doesn't work online, and kind of how can I bridge that gap? So we saw a lot of people kind of, pastors experimenting and then asking for feedback for their congregation. And some said, well, this way of doing the kind of sermon, that doesn't really work, or this way. And being willing to kind of say, okay, we're going to learn while we're doing. So not just are the people, the congregation, but the leaders. Digital culture is all about beta testing. You put something that's half baked and you put it out there and you let people test it and you figure out what works. But the church doesn't really do that. We're all about let's get it right and then put it out there. But the churches that both the people were more willing to let their pastors make mistakes and experiment, and the churches that were willing to basically kind of experiment themselves, those were the ones that kind of more quickly got over the fear of technology and kind of learned how to embrace it more readily. So
thank you for that. I had a question for Ms. Stratford. And it is specifically, you mentioned that there are stereotypes that go out. Oh, it looks like hopefully Dr. Campbell will come back. There are stereotypes that they have for older adults, and specifically around technologies. And I remember, I got I went to school for information science during the 90s, right when the internet just was opening up. And there was this discussion about the information highway and who was going to be able to jump on the information highway and who wasn't. And I noticed that seniors were really one of those groups that they instantly had kind of a negative narrative about, right? Like they were part of the divide, that they were going to miss out and all these things. So how do you overcome these kind of myths of older adults not being able to adapt? And that, like you said, that they should be in rocking chairs. And, how do you overcome these stereotypes in the media?
Well, what I told all of the participants is a great question that responded to my question. I had 17 questions, and I can't read all of those, of course, but one of them was very similar, like, what is it, who taught you how to use the internet and media, and what do you benefit from it? And so many that the ones that are not attempting are from that group, are surrounded by negative naysayers, people that just don't, they've accepted the fact they're too old, that stereotype. They're too old, they're need to be sitting around babysitting, making some crock pot dinners and watch TV in your rocking chair and let the young people do that. Well, it's not that easy anymore. And I try to reinforce that concept with these interviews and these individuals, 55 plus, because every facet of your living, you have to overcome that stereotypical view of you being lethargic, lazy, pretty much after you get older and you went, your brain went to turn to jelly. It's not the case, because I know tons of seniors that are still working, they're active, and that's how they thrive. And so they downplay that concept, and I want to have little personal stories from individuals like that on my website, particularly to show and sustain the question that you just asked me. So many others are asking the same thing. They accept their age, they feel they're defeated, and their grandkids are tired. I said, well, you show the independency by learning yourself. you empower yourself, your church, your job, whatever you're doing, and you and your friends will connect in your media experience much better and more. The ebb and flow will go, and everybody forget about the stereotype.
Well, thank
Hope
you
I
for
answered.
that.
Yes.
We actually have a question from our audience,
Okay.
and this is from Mr. James, and it's, how do you get folks who are not exposed to the technology excited about it and kind of express the importance of learning it? Both of you, either one can respond to that.
She can. Go ahead, Dr. Campbell. I don't know. I'll wait for you all to let me digest it a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I can step in for a minute. I think one of the things is just helping people get over the fear of the technology. You know, the fear. I think most people often would say like, "Oh, I'm afraid if I do this, I'm going to break it." You know, I'm going to break the computer, break the internet. And so I think both kind of having people that are patient and mentorship. You know, I think intergenerational mentorship, you know, where the older people are helping the younger people learn something, and the younger people can help them with technology, is a great way, you know, and kind of seeing like, hey, we have expertise in different areas, and that's important. I think also kind of basically whether it's, you know, the website the church has, or, you know, the devices that you're using, use devices that aren't as overwhelming. You know, there's a recent tablet that put out called the Granny Pad or the Grand Pad, and you know, it's kind of limited. Its focuses on, you know, how do I you know, FaceTime my kids, or, you know, do a video chat with my kids. This is a hot link to like us 1 or 2 social media platforms, so they press the button and takes it right to, you know, like their Facebook or something. So it basically limits the options, but then it allows them to get comfortable and feel that expertise with that. I know, you know, some friends that they've kind of worked really closely with their parents to kind of, okay, put how they organize, you know, their smartphones so that there's only a few, you know, apps there, and then they know how to use them and use them well. You know, I think, you know, if we think that they need to know everything, you know, quickly, but that can be so overwhelming. But it's kind of working with them, and that, like Ms. Marilyn was saying, that the introducing, breaking down the barriers, and then they'll be more willing to explore on their own.
Yes, yes. I'm in total agreement with everything plus she just said, Dr. Campbell. And the main point of what I think I felt the most sentimental towards was the interviewee I had that was the parent and part-time, a church secretary. And she had just learned the internet basics recently from her husband to do the interview. And she was still not ashamed. And I love that. I said, I got to have you involved in some projects. So I said, because she is, like I said, when you think you had a bad day, people like that really lift your spirits up. And a mother of 6 children. And I know she said she wanted to not give up. Her son helps her learn some of the basics, but she's not trying to be a guru in media. But, you know, sure, she want to be more efficient and use some of those strategies alongside of what she will be learning after. I'll show a few things that we talked about that I could help her with. So my last thing, I have one link. I don't know if I'm allowed to post it. Now, I often refer to some of my new people that are involved in learning media. It's a YouTuber. And so later, if anyone interested, his name is Monty Weaver, and is so much, he works especially with church strategies. You may have heard him or not, but recently I really got involved in watching a few of his videos, and it's very positive in promoting virtual and you know, physical and all the new digitized technology into the church, because he's working on different projects. So he has a playlist and all that, you know. So I'd like to share that, because any helpful information, as Dr. Campbell said, in this arena is helpful to all the social interactions. And it promotes everyone, church wins, the individual wins, and it's just wonderful. It gives me joy to see them light up. And I just wanted a 15-minute interview, for instance, because that was my first time. Those people stayed on that phone 30 minutes. And I'm like, well, I got 4 more people after you. And so that was my first time. I'm just straight shoot. I'm very honest. And I like to just tell it like it is. And I said, well, you know what? And so we like talking to you. Well, I like talking to you too, but I got 4 more people. And so, well, go ahead and get your cough out and go. They were directing me to go do. And I said, well, you know, you a senior because you're bossy. Oh, anyway.
Speaking of that, I wanted to kind of talk about what I don't have a real theoretical aspect of it yet, but I call it like kinfolk networking. And this is what happens, you know. My grandmother's 90 years old. And so, you know, of course, she always, I'm the information source. So, but her great grandchildren bought her a tablet. And so what you find when we get together, it's like this big, I want to say sharing, but, you know, so they're like, here, grandma, look at this on the laptop. And, you know, she might have some questions the next day. She'll say, oh, I heard about this on the TV. Show me this viral video, you know. And so it becomes kind of this family network, a kind of interaction, actually, with technology being part of that family interaction. So
Yes,
I was wondering, I guess, if either of you had those kind of experiences, just in a sense that would lessen the fear of technology, you know?
I think, you know, one of the things is that people think like the internet is this thing unto itself. You know, that they give it human qualities, they anthropomorphize it, and you know, it's kind of like, okay, it's gonna take over and it's gonna lead in this way. And obviously there are negative effects to any kind of media and use. But I mean, I love that story you're sharing, because you take the device and you're culturing it to the family. You're kind of bringing it into that kinship network, and you're saying, okay, we are going to shape it in a way that works for us. We're going to use it, the tablet, which is easier for grandma to interact with. We're going to use it for storytelling. We're going to use it to share information, but it's the family is kind of domesticating and taming it in one ways, so it fits into the life rather than letting the computer dictate the path of how it should be used.
I totally agree. And so many are inactive and are living sedentary lifestyles. Excuse me. So it's very exciting for so many of my respondents because they were just so happy someone stopped in and talked to them about this issue that they were facing, because some embarrassed to talk to their family because they're not even in entry level novices. And I'm like, don't worry about them. You go where your adventure is and pray about it, where you've been sent to do. And so it'll work out. And if your congregation has not been a part of it, suggest it to your pastor. Tell them, hey, this is what I need to do, because some are homebound, and the ones that are not interested are my hardest group to work in. And I'm not going to give up on them, because so many have, and they feel defeated. So when you light up like Miss Clay said, her grandmother, that's the ones that, oh man, they'll stay on there forever talking. I enjoy them, but I just was trying to finish my research. Oh, Lord. But so many I will invite in the future because they're waiting for the next big study, and because they're excited. And nobody, again, the academic journals that I had to work from when I started this project were mostly from third world countries. I mean, in the last 10 years, I mean, there's some geriatric articles, so forth, medical journals, but not specifically what I was going for, media usage in churches, jobs, and seniors. And that's my passion. And so since I'm in this group, we got to have some fun and some learning. So that's all I got to say, Miss Clay.
Well, we've kind of talked about the ways that seniors use technology. We've also discussed the ways that churches might intervene.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering now, what type of role does religion play in how faith communities adopt technologies? In other words, for example, I know there are some religions where they, for religious reasons, they don't adopt the technology, or they adopt it only minimally. While others will say, I therefore christen this this
Yeah.
tablet, and I'm going forth to evangelize all over the world with the internet. So
Yeah.
there's this real broad spectrum of
Yes.
adopting. I mean, of religious reasons to adopt, I guess, and
Yeah.
religious reasons not to adopt.
Right. Right.
So, could you kind of tell us more about that, Dr. Campbell?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there's three kind of basic responses that a religious community has to any new form of technology from the printing press onwards. And so if a religious community sees a technology as kind of neutral, and as a basically kind of like a conduit, you put information in and it's going to go to these people, they'll have a much more positive relationship to technology. They'll see it, okay, God's given us this tool to get the message out, and we can use it, and it's what we put into it, we're going to get out of it. But if you believe that kind of the technology actually kind of has its own kind of culture around it, then you're going to say that, oh, well, whatever I put into that technology or whatever message, it's going to get kind of reinterpreted by the culture of that technology. And it may be, in a negative way, it may give negative perceptions of our faith, of our community. It may kind of be deceptive to people. And so we can't trust the technology. And that, kind of perspective is seeing it as a, technology as a culture unto itself. And it's, a more critical view. And then somewhere in the middle of the, hey, technology is neutral, we can do anything with it, to technology is this evil cultural force, is, seeing people in the middle as realizing media is about people. I tell my students all the time, I go, it's easy to vilify and say the bad internet or the bad computer, but these are devices created by people, and not just one person. There's multiple people that go into any digital device, or even most, content, there was somebody had to build the software so that you and I could blog, so that someone else could edit it and put it out there. And so media is, it's based on people, and it can be used for good, and it can be used for evil. It can bring blessing, and it can bring strife. So it's really kind of determines how, what you do with what you put in your hands, and just recognizing that, again, like a church community, we can culture it in line with our beliefs if we want to, but if we just let it do whatever it wants, it may lead us in a negative direction. So it's kind of seeing that, it's a double-edged sword, that we can't just let do whatever it wants, but that we don't have to be afraid of it either.
And Ms. Stratford, I thought of another kind of part to this, which I know oftentimes the older people that I work with are concerned about privacy, like privacy, internet scams. Like, these are the kind of reasons that they give to not go online, which are valid reasons, and I think about it in terms of how daunting, like when you hear these stories of, oh, they had another hacking into this and they did, and so when you get those, have you ever had that kind of response around, like, this is a different type of fear, right? Like Dr. Campbell talked about how fear kind of comes up when it comes to technology, kind of runaway technology. And how does it come up just in day to day, I guess, those type of fears about technology?
Well, from my experience, again, as a senior and a recent researcher in this area, I'm telling you, most of the results and the data show that family and friends are the most negative culprits in this area. And sadly, they go to church to get positive reinforcement to make them feel good and and they're like, oh, I don't know how to do this virtual service. And if they change and they're panicking, and I say, it's okay. Again, I stress the libraries and go to a person that you feel comfortable with. And there's negative protocols, like Dr. Campbell was saying, with any online presence. But when you get note of that, report it, and just don't let there be an excuse to quit. Because
okay, so what I hear you saying is that sometimes it's the lack of patience on the part of family and friends,
yes,
or just kind of
yes,
not wanting to take that time, the extra time,
to help
and
them.
that in your
Yeah.
experience, you've seen that perhaps other venues like the library, like
Mhm.
a seniors group, or perhaps a community group, or also like churches,
Yes.
can be environments where they would the anxiety level would be
Mhm.
lessened,
Yes, yes,
and they might feel freer um, to
yes.
open up about what they know and what they don't know about technology.
That's right. And they open up to me on an immense level, trust me. And I have those audio recordings for those that are, I don't know how I could let hear some snippets on my site, because I protect those that didn't want to be shared. But it's so interesting. The people in their own lives, their personal space. And I was shocked, like, what? You know, and it's just, I can't imagine, because I'm a person that perseveres and find me a corner around a loop, and then open me a window to do what I know I'm passionate about. And I don't let anybody hold me back. So I can't, it was hard, take a minute to see, how did they let those people make a U-turn in their thinking? And I'm like, don't give up. That's all I know, because I'm from an educator that taught me that, and that's my matrix. you know. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, which is more kind of theological, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, again, and I know Dr. Campbell's work because
Mhm.
she published her dissertation shortly thereafter when I got into information science, and I just remember this big hoopla. It was like online religion was the next thing, and offline religion was going to be left behind, and
Mhm.
worship, uh, can we worship online for real or not? These rituals, do they make sense online or not? Um, so, uh,
Mhm.
what type of theological kind of issues come up around digital ecclesiology?
Well, I think, one of the things is like, people have been telling me for like, 30 years, like, well, online church is not the church. And I always say, well, what is your definition of church? Well, the church is the people of God gathered. Well, then an online church could fit that definition. So I think, one of the challenges is that because the model, the structure doesn't look like what we're used to, then we think it maybe it's not going to be theologically possible, or it's going to be kind of something incongruent or in competition with. And I think a lot of it is kind of just it's new, it's uncomfortable, it's growing pains. You can look back and the same critiques that people gave in the 90s and 2000s about online church were the exact same arguments made in the 1940s and 50s within debates in the Catholic Church about, can we televise the mass? Same debates that evangelicals had about, can you do online services or services through the radio and radio preaching? Is that actually a good thing or a positive thing? So, every time a new technology comes out, there's these same kind of questions, and it really goes back to, how do we define what is the church? There's a song I used to sing at Vacation Bible School that, the church is not a building, it's not a steeple, it's not the pews, it's the people. And so if that's true, then, our experience of what happened with the pandemic has shown us that, church can look very different. And just because it's mediated or because we're, coming together through the screen and not touching hands, that doesn't mean it's not still an authentic experience. But I think, it causes people to really kind of evaluate, how do we define what church is? What does it really mean to be in community? Because I've been in plenty of churches where, I went in and I went out and nobody talked to me, nobody asked my name. It was a very kind of sterile, disconnected experience. But I've had other times, and I'm sure that, you have too, where, you're with a group of people, maybe it's through a chat or some kind of thing, but you feel really connected because you have this sense of you're sharing this moment together. You have shared values and shared beliefs. And so you feel a sense of connection, even though you may have never seen them or you can't actually touch them. And so I think, it's about kind of saying, to what extent, are we caught up in the structure? And to what extent is it a deeper question about what it really means to be in community and relationship, and what is the mission of the church? So I think that's one of the core issues. It's like getting caught up in the language rather than looking at what the heart of what the church is supposed to be.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
I like that.
Well, I want to give the two of you an opportunity to ask a question of one another. If you have a question for Dr. Campbell, or Dr. Campbell, if you have a question for Ms. Stratford, I wanted to give both of you the opportunity for that, because I've just been, throwing my questions out there.
Okay. You go ahead.
Well, I guess I would ask, one thing that we found is that, oftentimes people's first reaction to technology or online church was, it's kind of negative and just kind of hesitant. And, it took different kind of strategies, for different people to kind of be able to kind of feel more comfortable with whether it's actually the practical using a technology or the language. But, were there any things that maybe some of your interviewees said this is what would really be helpful, that either someone say to me or do for me to help me kind of feel more comfortable, especially with church online?
Oh, great question. I've asked that off the recording because I had those 17 questions, and several asked me who were church members in various denominations, and they said, well, churches need to get with it, Miss Marilyn. I said, oh, they do. I said, well, expand your thoughts on that. And so they'll say, especially the younger people, because everyone has elders and seniors in their home and family spaces. And so they want to help them, many of them. And so they say, well, that's why we're going to appreciate your website and other leaders and people that you're affiliated with to help us, because they really want to feel proud. And the main thing, to remain relevant in their churches and as they are in their home. That's all. The majority of them want to remain relevant. Then us all sitting there, sitting around watching TV and babysitting all day, I'm telling you, and knitting and crocheting. Those days are gone. We got thriving seniors that are really, I want to empower their churches, and they're ready for virtual churches, so many of them. And those that are scared, I said, well, get with the ones that aren't scared and pair up and be buddies. You got to start somewhere. That's my thinking. Make it creative. And then talk to your pastor. I mean, if he's not approachable, what are you doing there? I'm frank. What are you doing if you can't approach a person in your congregation, or your leaders and so forth, and discuss these kind of matters, because they're affecting your lives on a personal note and everyone in that setting. And I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a question?
But Dr. Campbell, yes, I am so proud about the great readings, the books that you've produced. And I just want to follow up on some of those. Did you go through a particular publishing house, or did you self-publish? And how long have you been teaching? That's all.
I've been teaching in both kind of media studies and theological contexts for about 25 years. I started my career in the UK, and then I moved here to the US, and I've been at A&M for 17 years. You know, a lot of the books that I've done, you know, I've done through different publishers, some of them kind of academic publishers, and some of them, you know, kind of religious publishers like, you know, SCM Press, which is a British press, or Baker House. But the most recent books I put out during the pandemic, you know, I knew that if I was, you know, like this book on Ecclesiology for digital church, you know, we finished it in like 6 months, but it took a year for it to get published. And so the most of the books I published were e-published. So we published them either, you know, via Kindle or just through PDFs, because I could do in, you know, a month what it would take a year for a publisher to do. And I just felt this is information that needs to get out now rather than in a couple of years. And I've continued to do some ebooks, especially taking some of my research and trying to translate it for, you know, especially church audiences, so that they can benefit. You know, it's not just these scholarly theoretical ideas, but how could that actually help the church think through these challenging times. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, ebooks can be a great way to get a conversation going and to help people out.
Oh, yes, indeed. My last tip on that, one of my interviewees, you mentioned UK, and she, you know, I had all ethnicities I had to in my study, and she's a British American and a British dual citizenship. And she was most interested because she's living the military life. She's retired, her husband, veteran. And the stories, she's still working just because she wants to get out the house. And she banks, she uses entertainment sites. And I'm like, you sure you're not 17? Well, I'm going to tell you the same thing. How can you have been teaching 25 years, you don't look that age. So whatever water you are drinking from where my village used to teach me, I want some of that water. She was, and had instant recall. I mean, she was, whoo, and I enjoyed her immensely because she offered so much clarity to my study. And let's hope I answered that.
Well, we have a few minutes left. I want to ask a question about pastors. I want to circle back to questions about pastors and kind of when COVID happened, how they adapted, and, you know, strategies and so on. I remember well, a long time ago, like starting with the media ministry, right? You had the media ministry, and our pastor was like, don't know what it is, but you do it. Yes, go forth. So there's always, you know, there was kind of this separation, you know, the church, the technologies for church were something that the laity did. And the pastor didn't really have to, you know, deal with it if he didn't want to, you know. So, so when COVID happened, like you said, everybody had to pivot to this, trying to figure it out. And I wonder how. I know I saw you did the Lilly study. So was that pivot kind of difficult? You know.
Yeah, I think for a lot of pastors, again, remembering like the average church size in America is around between 65 and 83, and the average church pastor is, you know, somewhere between like 57 and 63. So, you know, these are people, these are small churches, and then there are people that are, you know, maybe not as kind of adaptable in some ways. And so, you know, in our research, we did studies looking at, okay, what skills do you wish you had, you know, before the pandemic hit that you didn't have, and what kind of characteristics or traits did you have to take on? And we found out, you know, like most of them, they, you know, again, if they had any kind of tech skills, whether like I ran a video camera at one time, they were much more willing to embrace technology, and they found the transition a lot easier. For those who didn't have any tech background or skills, or they weren't didn't even, play around with, video recording as a hobby. They were, I call them technological hesitant or reluctance. Like they went online because they had to, but they really weren't happy about it. And even after they kind of got comfortable with it, they still kind of felt like wearing somebody else's hat or somebody else's shoes. It wasn't something they felt natural. But many of them, after doing that for a year, so they began to see the importance. And if they were able to kind of get an informal tech team of people that did have those skills that they could work with, they began to talk about how digital could be part of their long-term ministry and not just a stopgap till they could meet face to face. I think, one of the things that we've been talking about is that it's so important that, when tech teams usually are, it's kind of the younger people, that are the ones that have all the tech skills. And that's great because they have the enthusiasm. But, in some ways, I remember once asking a tech, someone on our tech team at church, what camera I should buy. And it was like this really fancy one. And it's like, I just need to point and record these podcasts. And so I think, churches need to kind of partner, like pastors can't be the only expert, even in a small church. They have to work in teams. And I think that's bringing the young people with enthusiasm, but also you need the seniors as well. And the great thing about, digital media is that you can, you can record one service, but you can put it on multiple platforms. So for this young people who want to snippet it and turn it into TikTok videos, you can do that. But, maybe just having like the Facebook live stream or a YouTube channel that is just a little less threatening and easier to navigate, you can do that. And so, tech resources and tech ministry really needs to have consultation, not just from the young, but also the older, the members of the congregation, so that it meets not just one people's expectations of something nice and flashy, but it also actually meets the basic needs of just connecting and communicating.
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Stratford, I'm sending this question to you about older adults and the pivot during the pandemic.
Okay.
Has any of your stories kind of covered what happened when the pandemic happened? What type of skills did older adults wish that they had?
Just what you said in that last sentence. They wish they had the skills we're discussing today, because that isolation period, that downtime, they're overeating, they're not exercising, adding to health issues, and they wish they had the knowledge to be more savvier, to navigate Google, their phones, without calling the person in the next room who's eating their dinner. Can you help me, your grandma, or all that? They want to help us. If everybody learns, as we're talking about, it helps the whole family, and they go to church, and then they'll feel good and tell the pastor, like Dr. Campbell said, hey, I learned this, da da da, and then they share it in their meetings with other members, and it's very encouraging. But you can't talk the talk if you ain't walk the walk. You got to be able to go in there and honestly say, I learned this, and show that. And there, you get so many great responses. But he said, I wish many of the respondents wanted that empowerment like they're learning now in that isolation COVID time, because they were doing all the negative things as opposed to learning, and they just, again, gave up, a lot of them, and they concentrate on health issues. They almost gave up with church, like you all are saying, because they didn't find, what's the point? I don't know how to get on virtual church. I can't do that, and they just give up. And here I am trying to turn them around in what I'm trying to do. Yes, you can. You can do this, and we're going to have little empowerment, little snippets of personal stories of people that are doing it in their churches, especially, and their families. And that's what they're learning now. But that isolation gave a lot of them almost a depression from anxiety, honestly, because they were giving up, and everybody was traumatized. We all were, but Some handle it differently. And if you don't have an active pastor that they can call, or like a 911 number somewhere in-house that they can trust and have that confidential conversation, without being embarrassed, they'll open up. And they could have learned, had the church had some classes online. All of them don't, and it'd be great when they do, because the seniors are headed your direction. That's it.
Well, we had a question from Jan Brown, but I'm not sure. She typed the question or well,
No, she's all good. She needed the chat reposted, so
okay.
I did that.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you for that. Well, I am just so excited and happy that we were able to spend this hour together.
Yes.
I wish that I could continue this conversation because I think it's a very fruitful one, and I think that it's very generative, but we're just kind of at the start of it. So I'd like to thank our guest, the wonderful Dr. Heidi Campbell,
Yes.
and the unique and definitely super intelligent Miss Marilyn Stratford.
Weren't you blowing? Hey, this is for beginners again.
Oh, that's what I do. I'm the hype woman. I love the hype. I will hype you.
Hey, you can
the
hype me up
end.
because I'm a junior behind you ladies, but my foot is in the door. So look out for great things. And I love collaborating with other great scholars like yourself, because we got to make this our mission and stick to it and help these people. They're ready.
They are ready. They are ready.
Yes, they're ready. And then it's so fulfilling. So fulfilling. Yes.
If there's nothing else, we will say thank you so much for joining us for this edition of MTSO Science for Seminary Digital Dialogues.